Welcome back, everyone. As you can see, I'm here again broadcasting from the office. At least for now, we'll see how this thing goes. We have a great lineup in store. We're going to be going into the terrorist designation, at least upcoming, of the far-left advocacy group Antifa, far-left anarchist group Antifa. Now, this won't just be Antifa, very likely, that gets labeled as terrorists. This very likely extends to, quote, other similar groups. We're also going to be looking into which organizations are really behind the riots that we're seeing across the country right now. There is evidence of national coordination with far-left organizations. Also, there were reports of these rioters coming in from outside of the communities where they are committing this violence and these burnings and these arsons. And so we're going to be looking into some of that. Also, is the Chinese Communist Party involved in the riots? China issued a global call to action in April. We're going to be talking about that as well. Now, before we get started, folks, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Again, really need your support helping grow this channel. With that said, let's jump into it. So first off, on the idea that it may not just be Antifa that gets labeled as terrorists. This again extends to other similar groups. We'll start off with a tweet from President Donald Trump. He said the United States of America will be designating Antifa as a terrorist organization. Attorney General William Barr came out soon after with a press conference video where he said this.
Unfortunately, with the rioting that is occurring in many of our cities around the country, the voices of peaceful protest are being hijacked by violent radical elements. Groups of outside radicals and agitators are exploiting the situation to pursue their own separate and violent agenda. In many places, it appears the violence is planned, organized, and driven by anarchic and left extremist groups, far-left extremist groups, using Antifa-like tactics, many of whom travel from outside the state to promote the violence.
Now, expanding on that a bit more, this is a statement from the Justice Department. Barr said, quote, to identify criminal organizers and instigators and to coordinate federal resources with our state and local partners. Federal law enforcement is using our existing network of 56 regional FBI joint terrorism task forces. Now, he said the violence instigated and carried out by Antifa and other similar groups in connection with the rioting is domestic terrorism and will be treated accordingly. Now, note the key phrase here, and other similar groups. Again, we've seen the focus on Antifa, not on what these other similar groups may be. And so very likely, again, this may not just be Antifa that gets labeled as terrorists and prosecuted possibly as terrorists, but these other groups as well. Now, with that said, who are these other groups? We're going to be looking at a few articles now. First off, we have one from Trevor Loudon. He's an author with Epoch Times, one of our contributors. He wrote a story that says, Cities Burn, but none dare call it communism. Now, Loudon says it's not accurate to call this a normal protest against police brutality and racism, or just as frustration and rage. He says this is a, quote, communist-inspired insurrection, nothing more, nothing less. He says in Minneapolis, where the Democratic Socialist of America has close to 600 members, DSA, the Democratic Socialist of America, have been, quote, actively supporting rioters and participating in protests. He says the DSA, which works closely with Antifa-aligned groups, supported a resolution at their national convention in August to form a national working group to help drive collaboration and resource sharing to support our anti-fascist organizing. It's a quote from them. They say it bluntly, quote, 1 foot in the institutions, 1 foot in the streets. Now note, this Resolution 9, as they call it, shows the DSA established a network to connect and coordinate the, quote, anti-fascist movement. The document states, quote, let's form a national working group to help drive collaboration and resource sharing to support our anti-fascist organizing, because we must fight exploitation, white supremacy, and patriarchy. And it adds, quote, this resolution is focused on helping locals proactively disrupt fascist organizing in their region. Now, would the operations of DSA in similar groups involved also fall under Trump's new terrorist designation. Loudon pointed as well to a May 27 tweet from Twin Cities DSA in Minneapolis calling for supplies, including supplies to wash away tear gas, materials for shields, and items that could be used as weapons such as hockey sticks. Now, they say they needed the supplies at the 3rd Police Precinct, and notably that same precinct was later set on fire by rioters not long after the DSA issued its notice. Also, the eco-socialist branch of DSA tweeted on May 28th that they were working to, quote, support the ongoing working class uprising. Now, that's an important thing to remember here because this is how a lot of these organizations are regarding this, as a revolution, an uprising. Loudon noted another group supporting the riots in the Workers' World Party. He notes that this Stalinist, Trotskyist organization, which supports communist regimes, including those of China, North Korea, and others, issued an article titled, quote, "Against Police Violence and Capitalism, to rebel is justified." And this article explains that part of what's justified in its definition is violence. Loudon notes the article quotes World Workers' Party founder Sam Marcy's defense of the 1992 Los Angeles riots, in which 63 people died. It states, quote, "In times when the bourgeois is up against the wall, when the masses have arisen suddenly and unexpectedly, the bourgeois gets most lyrical in abjuring violence. It never occurs to any of them to show that the masses have never made any real leap forward with the theory of nonviolence. Timidity never made it in history." So what do we have there? It's a direct call for violence, a justification for violence. Now, Loudon points to a few others. The Revolutionary Communist Party issued a document on May 28th that points to police violence and similar issues in states. None of this will finally be ended until we end this system through revolution, nothing less. The Party for Socialism and Liberation wrote on May 26, quote, "In this absolutely critical period, we sharpen our resolve to build organizations capable of waging militant class struggle against the racist state and the ruling class." Now note, many DSA branches and communist movements are actively supporting and helping coordinate the riots. Their Twitter accounts are filled with posts like this, including those of some DSA-connected politicians. Many socialist and communist organizations are directly involved. They are actively coordinating and participating. They're doing this openly. There are calls to use the riots as a vehicle for revolution, and they're also calling for violence. They're talking about promoting violence, and they're talking about justifying the use of violence. Going forward, I think a few questions are going to come up. Who finances these groups? Who is leading them? And who are the individuals involved? If they are nonprofits or political organizations, a lot of this information is very likely public, or at the very least, available to governments. Now, DSA is behind several big-name politicians, who I won't name here. DSA has public messaging tying it to the riots and to national coordination of, quote, anti-fascist activities. Now that Antifa and its related organizations have been declared terrorist organizations, what does this mean for DSA and all the individuals connected to it? Now, in other news, rioters are reportedly coming into these communities and committing acts of violence, arson, you name it. They're coming in from outside of these communities, allegedly. Trump tweeted, quote, 80% of the rioters in Minneapolis last night were from out of state. They are harming businesses, especially African American small businesses, homes, and the community of good, hardworking Minneapolis residents who want peace, equality, and to provide for their families. Epoch Times reported that officials concerned outside groups inciting lawlessness amid Minneapolis protests. The article notes that in Minneapolis, the mayor, Jacob Frey, said during a press conference on May 30th, quote, "We saw more and more people coming from outside of the city. We saw more and more people looking to cause violence in our communities, and I have to say it is not acceptable." The article also notes that in St. Paul, Minnesota, every person arrested on the night of May 29th was from out of state. The mayor there, Melvin Carter, told reporters, he said, local activists confirmed that the violent protesters aren't from Minneapolis. And again, Attorney General William Barr stated on May 30th,
It is a federal crime to cross state lines or to use interstate facilities to incite or participate in violent rioting, and we will enforce those laws.
Now, some video footage also suggests that people are coming from outside of these communities. Here's one in Minnesota. This is allegedly one of the first individuals to begin smashing things, to begin destroying things. He is a white man, apparently. He's dressed in all black, carrying a black umbrella. Now, there were some reports claiming he was a police officer. There is no evidence I've seen currently showing this. Members of the community appear to try to stop him. They follow him, and he gets aggressive with them. Now, watch what we have here. Now, the question is, who is this individual? Dressed very much like these Black Bloc or Antifa protesters. And you can see that the community does not seem to be happy that he's there. They do not seem to be happy with the actions he has committed smashing these windows. Was this event tied to the Chinese Communist Party's open call to 230 international socialist movements to use the coronavirus to push for political gains? An important bit of history here. This wasn't too long ago, in fact. Chinese Communist Party rallies 230 leftist parties to exploit CCP virus for political gains. This is an article in the Epoch Times, again from Trevor Loudon. Now, he notes an open letter published on April 2nd by the International Department of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China. Now, the Chinese Communist regime called for, quote, coordinated policies and, quote, mobilization of resources and forces globally. Now, among these global communist movements are the Cuban Communist Party, other major communist parties, but also some that are not in power, such as the Communist Party of Britain and the Communist Party USA. Now, note that many communist newspapers and publications also push this letter. This suggests that many communist and socialist movements may have received the Chinese Communist Party's call to action very similar to what we may be seeing now. Now, let's look at another tweet. This is from Emmy Award-winning former senior news correspondent Adam Housley, saying that, quote, more from my intel source, Russia is part of this, but the scope of the cyber ops being done by China right now is staggering. They are also using surrogates in Venezuela and Cuba and a few other friendly areas. And let's elaborate on that a bit. Now, we saw that among the signatories on this open letter from the Chinese Communist Party, calling for global mobilization of all these different forces to feed into the Chinese regime's interest. Among them was the Communist Party of Cuba. And according to that individual, we have the communist regime in Cuba being involved in some of the operations right now, as well as the Chinese regime being involved in some of these operations right now. Now, some of the organizations that are involved, some of these revolutionary communist organizations we know are involved based on their tweets, based on their activities and their statements. Some of them have active ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Some of them are directly Maoist organizations. And when it comes to Antifa, and again the designation of Antifa as a terrorist organization, and notably we haven't seen the details on this yet, although Attorney General William Barr did say that the FBI different task forces on terrorism are going to start working on these cases. We don't know exactly what they have. We don't know exactly what the criteria will be to identify these Antifa members or Antifa affiliates. Now, that said, folks, we'll be keeping an eye on all this as it goes forward. If you haven't already, again, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Again, folks, it needs your support helping grow this channel. Of course, again, we're going to be continuing our coverage on this coronavirus, but as things, I'd say, change, we're going to be focusing as well on some of these other big topics. Now, folks, again, we're going to be broadcasting Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. Please don't forget to tune in. That said, please take care of yourselves, stay healthy. We'll see you next time.